is Tuesday, January 15th. You are watching news from Kazakhstan. These are the headlines. Raging elements. A storm leaves thousands of South Kazakhstan residents without heating and electricity. Neighboring regions are waterlogged while snowstorms plague the north. An administrative arrest for an obscene gesture towards the Senate Speaker's motorcade. A man in Pavlodar is detained for showing his middle finger. Almaty school children initiated into the Panfilov's 28 Guardsmen. The legendary commander of the division would have turned 120 years old. Cleanup operations continue after last Saturday's storm in southern Kazakhstan. Strong winds ripped the roofs off of buildings and damaged power lines. 18 administrative buildings in 6 towns suffered in total. An emergency headquarters was set up in the region with an additional 200 personnel and 17 pieces of equipment. There were no casualties.
Severe winds broke out on the night of January 12 in several districts of Zhambyl and South Kazakhstan regions, closing transnational highways connecting Almaty and Tashkent. Village Shakpakat and Zhulan area experienced power cuts and water supply shortages due to extreme weather conditions, with electricity problems also reported in Talas district of Zhambyl region. The central heating plant in the town of Karatau had to suspend operation due to a collapse of the concrete chimney. Thus, the towns of Karatau and Zhantas were hit worst by the weather, leaving local residents with no heat and power. The electricity was also cut in most of Sarasu district of Zhambyl region, while 30 transforming substations went out of order in Kozolordar region. We've stepped up control over schools and hospitals, while almost all residents of Karatau now have access to natural gas supply. The staff of Disaster Medicine Center render necessary psychological help to the local population. In some areas, the wind speed reached 45 meters per second. Due to emergency situation, the Deputy Prime Minister Krymbek Kusherbayev and Deputy Head of the Emergencies Ministry Valery Petrov have visited the scene. The governor of the region, Kanat Bozumbayev, was called off early from his vacation. Rescue teams and civil defense regiments are now cleaning out the roads and restoring communication lines. The mass evacuation has been postponed, with regional weather forecasters promising the storm not lasting longer than a day. About 100 regional power lines were damaged the most, with the Republican Power Supply Network Management saying this is an absolute record and full recovery expected to take over 4 days. According to preliminary data, the hurricane damage is already estimated at over $16.5 million. The Regional Ministry of Emergencies says another emergency is likely to hit Zhambyl region in the next few days. We normally have an emergency supply stocked for such cases, but we never had as much damage at the same time. Each year we conduct maintenance of loose network nodes, broken insulators, unstable power line towers, etc. But this time the damage is devastating.
While winds rage in the south, neighboring regions were being flooded, and the north was once again buried under snowbanks. Rescuers are working in emergency mode, and a weather alert has been posted. For more on the whims of nature, we turn to the next report.
South Kazakhstan region has suffered yet another flood. Over 160 houses were damaged in Saragash district and several were completely destroyed in some of the region's villages. The local population reports on heavy livestock losses. According to villagers, they suffered floods every single year. Locals are still horrified, recalling how they had to escape the rising water. These 2 houses have been flooded for 3 years in a row. Last year, we even took pictures of them and appealed to the city administration. However, we were refused any financial aid, as a TV report informed only about some yards flooded, so we end up with nothing. But 2 days ago, everything went under water and we barely had time to rescue our children from the houses. Waist-height waters flooded the entire yard. We had to group 6 people in a single chain so as not to drown in neck-deep waters that flooded the roads while leaving the premise. Once we escaped, the wall collapsed, and by morning the whole house was gone. Almost all rescue teams of the area were involved in the emergency response. The water gradually subsided in most of the yards, however, somewhere special drainage equipment had to be used. Fortunately, there were no casualties, but villages still suffered severe damages. All the owners of the destroyed properties were provided with clothes and food at the expense of the regional budget. I hope the Special Commission will manage to estimate the damage caused in the last 2 days, and the issue of the compensation distribution will be solved soon. In the meantime, Pavlodar region suffers heavy snowfalls. Local emergency services have already rescued several cars stuck in snowdrifts on the country roads. During January 12th to 13th, we have had 6 responses to Bayanaul and Ekibastuz districts regarding cars stuck in snowdrifts. In total, around 7 cars and 20 people have been evacuated within this period. According to the weather forecast, Pavlodar region will suffer extreme weather for a few more days as a storm warning was recently issued for Tuesday. Strong winds and snowfall are expected, which will likely mean that long-distance routes will be closed for traffic.
The roof of an Almaty school dining hall collapsed under the weight of snow. The incident took place over the weekend, so luckily there were no victims. Rescuers and school administration are yet to announce what caused the collapse. It is possible weather conditions may be blamed, even though the school administration is responsible for clearing the snow on time. We report with more from the scene of the incident.
We call it a maximum security prison. Just wait over here. There are guard posts and locked perimeter gates here, so it's simply impossible to get on the territory of the school number 111. Parents who came to pick up their kids after school are very confused. Many have learned from the media about the collapse of the roof over the school's dining hall. Luckily, it happened over the weekends. Can you imagine if kids were there? This is horrible. Just the thought alone shakes me. Didn't the school have a major remodeling lately? It's been seismically reinforced as well. The kids still had their lunches on Monday, although this time they were boxed. We had borsaks, cakes, chocolate bars and juices. The building of the dining hall, which was damaged by the heavy snowfall, is over 50 years old. In the summer of 2012, it went through major repairs. It seemed to be very thorough work. Even all the windows were replaced along with the roofing. Nobody expected this to happen, especially after the repairs. This obviously shows the quality of the done work. Parents say that the school principal reported about the completion of repair works at the beginning of the school year. Nobody got into details, since people who actively interfere with school affairs end up in disfavor. We can't tell you anything because it's going to reflect on our children. It's practically impossible to find out anything regarding the school finances and how long it will take to restore the dining hall, since the administration refuses to talk to the press. At the moment, the 450 square meters of profiled sheeting and metal tiles have been mostly dismantled, with a construction crew rushing to restore the roof.
In related news, the weather may get in the way of a sanctioned meeting in Astana. The approved location for residents of a dormitory on the city outskirts was swept up in snow. On Monday, the Residents Initiative Group surveyed the square and practically made the city administration promise to clean up the snow for the public campaign.
It is impossible to drive or walk here due to huge, up to 3 feet high snowdrifts. We have made numerous calls to the local administration's Department of Internal Policies, but no actions were taken, even though they promised to clear the road. On January 16, local residents intend to hold a night rally at the intersection of Pushkin and Shakarima streets, protesting against taking of land under their dormitory for the construction of a new power plant. The tenants disagree with the proposed compensation amount offered by the city administration, as it is not enough for the purchase of equal housing. People also plan to bring shovels to the meeting despite the administration's promises to eventually clear the park from snow.
Almaty region residents divided 40,000 square meters of land with the slogan, 1,000 square meters to each Kazakhstani, in one of the region's more expensive areas. The land's legal owner wants them out, but the squatters cite the Kazakh constitution, according to which each citizen holds the right to own 1/4 of an acre. More on this contentious story in the next report.
Back in the Soviet times, this land was part of the children's summer camp but was later resold 7 times. Some 60 men allegedly squatted the plot and even managed to build houses there. That is when the old owner showed up and demanded the land back. Outraged people turned to district administration, asking for new plots in accordance with the government decree, which says that every citizen of Kazakhstan is entitled to 1/4 of an acre. The administration, though, denied their request. In September 2011, a man claiming to be the landowner showed up here, and as it turns out, Grand Elite 07 company bought the plot in 2007, although it's not clear why they waited until 2011. They haven't even checked if anyone was living here and avoided making the inventory before the purchase. Who knows, maybe there was only a hole left after a nuclear blast there. Now, some fight for the right to utilize the plot for construction purposes, while others have lived here for 18 years straight. Gulbaysha and her family stayed here since 1990s, when her husband was hired as a security guard for the area. Now the owner urgently wants them to move out. We can stand up for ourselves and we intend to keep fighting for our ownership rights. In the search of justice, these people filed a claim against the construction company. It was later revealed that the enterprise doesn't even have an actual office at an indicated address, and it looks like there are many similar companies in the country that buying out land lots, taking advantage of the political stability in Kazakhstan.
A Pavlodar man was put under a 5-day arrest for an obscene gesture to the Senate Speaker Kairat Mami's passing motorcade. Although neither the speaker nor his entourage noticed anything, the watchful police officers chased the hooligan and turned him to court. The news created a squall of comments on the internet.
A young Pavlodar citizen was subjected to a 5-day arrest sanction for making an obscene gesture. The incident happened last week when Kairat Mami was on the working trip to the region. On the way from the airport, the formal motorcade passed by the 21-year-old local, who greeted the officials by giving them the finger. The misdemeanor didn't go unheeded and resulted in administrative proceedings against the rebel. During the trial, the defendant repented the antisocial behavior and explained that he didn't know who was in the motorcade, while the offensive gesture was impetuous and indiscreet. He classified his actions as impetuous deeds and insisted he didn't know who was there in the motorcade. The court ruled to hold the delinquent administratively liable and imposed a 5-day arrest sanction. The court ruling has not yet come into legal force. The perpetrator was sent to a detention facility despite Kairat Mami and his retinue never even noticing the insult. The Pavlodar citizen isn't the first person to have misused his body parts. In October of 2012, in neighboring Russia, several people simultaneously gave a finger to the Prime Minister Dmitry Medvedev during his visit to St. Petersburg. None of them, however, were prosecuted. On Monday, Kazakhstan online community launched a protest campaign across several social networks, asking for freedom of expressing emotions, since the administrative code doesn't constrain using gestures.
In other news, experts predict the bankers' blacklist offered by the National Bank Deputy Chairman Danyar Akishev may provoke a new outflow of capital from the country. They are convinced that Grigory Marchenko's assistant's announcement is an attempt to clamp down on the financial sector. In the meantime, experts also note that the head banker himself is passing on unpopular proposals through other people.
The main financial regulating authority is planning to create a blacklist for discredited bankers knowingly engaged in providing unrecoverable loans and allowing financial institutions bankruptcy. According to the National Bank's Deputy Chairman Danyar Akishev, politicians currently refrain from supporting the idea of employment ban and penal sanctions against the delinquent banking sector employees. Social activist Erik Abdildin also expressed concerns about the questionable motion of Grigory Marchenko's agency. All kinds of blacklists do more harm than good for society because they are hardly ever impartial. Blacklists aside, Kazakhstan financiers have been subjected to constraints and ongoing persecution. In the summer of 2002, the head of Timirbank, Mukhtar Ablazov, who joined the opposition at the time, was accused of organizing a criminal group and sentenced to 6 years in prison. A year later, he was pardoned, but in 2009, the criminal proceedings against Ablazov were reinstated, this time on charges of embezzling BTA bank assets to the amount of $70 million. Currently, the opposition banker has to reside abroad to avoid the government prosecution. Meanwhile, in the summer of 2011, the Valut Transit Bank head Andrei Bilayev was sentenced to 10 years of imprisonment for owing over $53 million to the bank depositors. Political scientist Azim Baygali endorsed the National Bank's initiative, but also expressed concerns that the fear of being blacklisted might provoke bankers to divest capital from Kazakhstan. The country needs the kind of economic climate that will let the banks prosper while maintaining transparency of financial operations. The retirement plan expert Aydar Alibayev continued the list of the banished bankers with the former head of Nauruz Bank Orazali Yerzhanov, who was arrested in Moscow in spring of 2010 and sentenced to 6 years in prison for misappropriation of $26.5 million. Another notorious case resulted in conviction of Allianz Bank top managers Margulan Sisimbayev, Zhomart Yertayev and Abulkasim Mamurbekov for the alleged theft of $1 billion. Alibayev is convinced that tightening control of the banking sector is unlikely to improve the situation. All the nominees for executive positions in financial institutions undergo a multi-stage screening procedure by the National Bank and stockholders. That's when the inappropriate candidates must be filtered out. Earlier, Grigory Marchinsko's financial agency suggested introducing sanctions against the auditors providing inaccurate bank status reports. However, the National Bank's proposal never made it to the draft legislation. Meanwhile, experts agree that the idea of blacklists infringes on the constitutional rights and freedoms.
In a new twist in the case of Oskar Maldashov, both sides disagree with the charges brought against the defendant. The brother of the Golos Respubliki opposition newspaper director was accused of illegal drug possession with intent to distribute. However, the prosecution now asks to soften the charges, while the defense team is asking to stop the trial altogether.
The criminal case against the brother of the banned newspaper publisher has taken an unexpected turn on Monday when the prosecutor requested to mitigate the charges against the defendant. Oskar Moldashov's attorney also requested to resume the preliminary hearings on the case and initiate an additional investigation. The court granted the petitions of both parties. The case of Oskar Moldashov should go back to the prosecutor of Bostandyk district in order to mitigate the charges, since the prosecutor essentially dropped them and they served as basis of the entire case. On October 31st last year, Oskar Moldashov was arrested by a police special unit which allegedly found drugs in his pocket during the search. This led to Moldashov facing imprisonment of up to 15 years. They put a blue bag on my head and threw me in the minivan. I shouted and everyone heard me. After that, they spread some substance over my palms and forced my hands in my pockets while putting something there as well. During recent hearings, the court failed 3 times to appoint a jury in the case, and it was passed for additional investigation. The defense believes that the prosecutors will ask for 7 years of prison, but the lawyers will insist on dropping all charges.
The editorial office is shut down and the trial continues. Such is the current situation with Gulzhan.org. The website's director, Gulzhan Yergalieva, plans to renew work 30 days from now, provided that the appeals process is won and Kazakh law enforcement officials all of a sudden lift the ban on opposition media.
The chief editor of the website Gulzhan.org, Gulzhan Yergalieva, took a month off with her staff ending up on forced vacation. They, however, will be back to work in February, the journalist promised, explaining the decision by a series of trials and a recent decision of the Medeu court which banned the site to distribute information. Our appeal will only make it to the court on January 20th because, according to the law, it has to be 15 days after the decision of the Medeu court. That's where we are. With the courts and prosecutors, the situation is pending. Therefore, there's nothing we can do. We no longer have any mass media and there's no clarity either. Another hearing was scheduled for Monday, but it was postponed till January 22nd due to the judge's illness. By then, the prosecution is expected to provide a confirmation of the $33,000 transfer to the bank account of the orphanage number 1. Previously, Saltanat Akhanova, the wife of the former financial police officer, redirected the funds to the orphanage following the trial, which found 2 articles of Gulzhan.org to be defamation. Money is not what matters in Gulzhan.org case, insists politician Bulat Abilov. He's been monitoring the trials and has already made a conclusion. It's all part of one plan to keep everything quiet and calm in Kazakhstan and have no more public speeches. If there's no independent media, then it seems like everything is normal in the country. Basically, the idea is to eliminate criticism against the president, to strengthen his identity and corruption within top echelons of power, on top of other negative aspects. Not too long ago, the site's staff already had another forced leave. Back then, it was explained by the necessity to process new ideas and a change of format.
The Nuratan Party Youth Wing offered to create a list of 100 most popular foreign books and translate them into the state language. Jasatan members intend to conduct a poll among young people and utilize social networks to create the top 100 list.
The pro-reading campaign started off in the National Library, where Kazakh-speaking bloggers and journalists gathered to encourage the young readers to be more selective about choosing books. The organizers are planning to survey at least 10,000 young people and then hold a meeting of the working group formed by poets, writers and journalists. One of the campaign's hallmark aspects is complete absence of censorship. There are no limitations to the young people's choice. They could go for anything from classic literature and science fiction to detective novels and poetry. Social and political writings will also be accepted.
The legendary division commander Panfilov was commemorated in Almaty on Monday. One of the heroes distinguished in defending Moscow from the Nazis would have turned 120 this year. School children were initiated into the Panfilovtsi. But it isn't just the digital generation that declines to talk about the historic and exemplary achievements of the commander.
Monday marked the 120th anniversary of Ivan Panfilov, the legendary Red Army commander. War veterans, representatives of NGOs, guests from neighboring countries and direct descendants of the hero all came to the 28th Panfilov Guardsmen Park to honor their memory. The hero's granddaughter Alua Baykadamova says there are only 2 episodes in Soviet history when military units were named after their leaders, Russian Civil War Red Army commander Vasily Chapayev and her grandfather. These days, the young generation can learn of Panfilov's achievements through virtual battles. All strategy games are quite familiar with the concept of Panfilov loop. I believe that if the online community and young gamers know this, then my grandfather's name won't be forgotten. Air Force Colonel Paul Minakin spent 35 years in the armed forces of the USSR in Kazakhstan. He was trained with Panfilov as a role model in the military academy, examining archived war documents. Nowadays, questions are raised about the authenticity of the heroic deed, and the Russian military prosecutor insists the entire story was made up by the war reporter. Nevertheless, Minakin still believes it all indeed happened, including the Battle of Dubasekova village and the famous quote of "There is no way to drop back, only Moscow is behind us." I even found out about Kurmangazy Kozhambekov, who served in the artillery unit and also with Panfilov's men. Since he took part in the battle but was not listed, he was assigned to a different division and indeed survived. The 28 fallen soldiers were from Kazakhstan, and it is provided by the archive data. You can send an inquiry to Podolsk, where the archive of the Defense Ministry are located. On Monday, an Almaty school gymnasium held a special event to initiate freshmen into the ranks of young Panfilov followers. Their senior schoolmates gave a masterclass on what it means to carry the title with honor. Meanwhile, younger pupils shared their understanding of the concept. A young Panfilov follower must protect his homeland, be brave and love his country. I must study well, protect my homeland and love my country. I must always protect my homeland. They should study well without a single bad grade. These children don't know yet about controversies linked with the story of the 28 fallen heroes. The military prosecutor first questioned the accuracy of the account as far back as in the 40s. Thus, the investigation reveals that the heroic deed of the 28 Panfilov Guardsmen, widely covered in the media, is a fictitious story made up by reporter Vasily Karateev, Krasnaya Zvezda editor David Artenberg, and particularly the newspaper's literature secretary Alexander Krivitsky, signed Lieutenant General of Justice Nikolai Afanasyev, the chief military prosecutor of Soviet Armed Forces, May 10, 1948. On top of that, a few years back, the press published an interview with Sergei Mironenko where he talks about 28 pseudo-heroes. But amazingly, no one wants to believe the documentary true. For Almaty residents, the 28 Panfilov heroes are like 300 Spartans who also fought for their freedom and dignity.
That is all we have time for now. Thank you for watching. See you tomorrow.